Guys, there are a lot of cool things that happen during the course of my week. Not always, but 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 there are a lot of cool things that happen. But one of the things that I really enjoy is in these conversations that I have with my friends when we have an opportunity to discuss The Chosen. The Chosen is an artistic interpretation of the life of Christ and his early disciples. And while it's just like, who was that person? I can't remember for sure who wrote the book about the Apostle Peter, which was a big, book that many years ago people read that. And I think none dare call him something or other. I don't know exactly what it was, But the point is, it was a fictionalized account of the life of the Apostle Peter, but it drew from many accurate things about the life of the apostle. And this is exactly what The Chosen does. It's just the medium is different. Instead of a book, it's a television series. And so I've been blessed so many ways by this series, and I am grateful that God has kind of led the way for us to live in a time when we're able to communicate the truth, small t, not capital T, but also with the capital T with the Gospels and all that. But the small t is that there's so much truth that we can learn from these episodes. And that's what we're going to be doing tonight with this episode about the raising of Lazarus. Now, Lazarus was a friend of Jesus, along with his two sisters, Mary and Martha. And Lazarus died. The girls had sent, his sisters had sent word to Jesus that Lazarus was sick, and he willfully delayed until Lazarus died. Now, I believe this is all part of Jesus' strategy to essentially bring to a climax to confront the religious authorities with his power and his person. And so, but when he comes on the scene, the sisters are really struggling because Jesus was unresponsive. And I want to kind of say that one more time, is that the friends of Jesus were really struggling because he was unresponsive. And that's so often the case in our own individual lives. So we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail this evening, have a chance to discuss this. And so let's go ahead and we'll get started in just one moment. There they are.
Hello. Good evening.
My partners in crime. So they're in the upper left-hand corner. We have Val. And next to him, Val, if you could turn and introduce... No, there you go. There you go. Turn and introduce your lovely wife.
That's my lovely wife, Nikki.
Okay, and Nikki, if you could look down and introduce the lady down there.
This is the beautiful Janice.
And so, Janice, if you'll just turn to your right and yeah, there you go. All right. So that's fun. It reminds me of the old, what was it? Was it Hollywood Squares that did that?
Yeah.
Brady Bunch.
The Brady Bunch too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So all right. We divided this episode up into two different, discussions. Just simply because there's too much to cover. And it's like the episode itself is like It's like an hour and 13 minutes or something like that. So we wanted to just pick up, and where we left off was that there again, like I said, the sisters sent word to Jesus to come and help Lazarus. Jesus willfully delayed. When they come, they're really kind of like struggling with, why weren't you responsive to our need? We're your friends. And then he starts to talk about, theological platitudes. Well, your brother will rise again. And Martha takes that to mean that he's talking about the resurrection at the last day. And so she says, I get it, Jesus, but that's not helpful. That's really not, that's a very loose Carrie Decker paraphrase. So then Mary comes, and she's hurting too. And so they ask him, he asks to be brought. To me, this is just such a dramatic moment in the Gospels. There's a lot of them, but this is kind of like the dramatic moment outside of, the crucifixion and resurrection, where he asks to be brought to the tomb. Then he does the unthinkable, and he asks the sisters to roll away the stone. And they just kind of like try to give Jesus a reality check. By the way, if you stop and think about it, anytime you're trying to give God a reality check, you're going to always be surprised. And so he says, listen, didn't I tell you that you will see if you only believe, or something like that? I can't remember the exact quote, but and so I've preached about this passage before, and like I said last week, it's the most significant white space in the Bible, that gap between when Jesus does that and when they roll away the stone, because nobody could have given permission to do that except for those two sisters. What a profound step of faith. And so now we're at that moment when Jesus calls for Lazarus to come out, and he comes out wrapped in the burial cloths. And that's where we start tonight. So this is actually question 9. If you wanted to catch our broadcast last week, you can kind of catch up with it. It says, so what would be your first reaction when you initially saw Lazarus in his grave clothes? What would be going through your mind if you were one of those who unbound Lazarus? And how would things change for you in the immediate aftermath of witnessing this?
I would have thought ghost. Just like some of those ladies that were screaming, I'd be doing that.
Yeah. It would be like beyond weird, to experience that. And that might be an interesting point to consider, is that Jesus didn't run around just doing all of this type of stuff. He wasn't some sort of circus act, but instead what he did was that he did this. But if he did run around doing this all the time, that it'd probably blow people's minds. Anybody else?
Well, the way the show put it, the immediate aftermath was the smell.
I know.
But yeah, you would just be I I don't know, just floored by the
Mm-hmm.
situation. Just
Yeah.
everybody's face on the whole show, just unbelievable
Yeah. Janice.
and scared.
Oh, of course.
Well, just to Val, like, why would he smell if he didn't decompose?
Well, how do you know he didn't, Janice?
Maybe he did.
Well, he very well could have. I mean, that we're talking
Yeah.
about the God who has authority.
Lepers hole, and they're all kind of
Yeah, they're kind of like the Walking Dead.
yeah.
And so it's very possible that he was already in, or he had gone through a process of decomposition. Now, think about this for a moment. By the way, and I think I've probably told you guys this before. If not, I've told some other folks this story. But no, really. As a pastor, you really witness some strange stuff. And I've been kind of witnessing strange stuff my whole life. It's just kind of the path that I've been on. But once I was invited to stand with a woman whose mother had died. Did I tell you guys this story before? Okay.
I haven't heard it.
All right. Well, you're about to. So, and even if you have, you're going to hear it again. I was invited to stand with a woman whose mother had died, and she was about to and so they were going to cremate her. And so we weren't at the burial place. We were at the crematorium, and so that. And there's actually only one in our region where they do it. And so they had the casket there, and it's just a cardboard box. It's not a fancy casket or anything. They just put you in a cardboard box, and they fire up the gas jets and all. But the mother, before she had died, asked the daughter, "Please make sure that I'm dead." I'm not kidding you. Yeah. "Please make sure that I'm dead before they cremate me."
Before they put me in the oven.
Yes, exactly. And of course, people already know this, but I assume, but they don't embalm you before they cremate you. Now they will keep you on ice to forestall the decomposition, but and I really wanted to peek myself. I know that that's crazy, but I really did. I wanted to peek myself. And so I tried to lean in as far as what I thought would be appropriate. But I couldn't lean in far enough to see her. But I remember the daughter. Yeah. I remember the daughter looking inside the casket and then immediately turning to me and said, "Yep, she's dead." So it was evident. I'm not going to put my loved ones through that, because if I'm not ready to go in, that's all right. I will be by the time I come out. So, but that's a long story to make this point. Is that it's very possible that he was already in a state of decomposition. Now think about this. the same God who created this universe that we live in is the same God who can reverse the effects of decomposition if that's what he chooses to do. You know, it's not impossible for God. It's like that old gospel song that God specializes in things thought impossible. You know, so how about you? Here's another question: is that what if you were one of the guys who were tasked with unbinding him? What would be going through your mind?
Be afraid of what you'd see underneath. I think.
Yeah, man, I'm with you on that. You know, because he comes out. Now, I don't know exactly how he presented himself, but he comes out and he's bound. And I'm thinking, okay, now this is really freaky. But now Jesus is asking me to unwrap this guy. Janice?
And in their culture, they probably weren't allowed to even touch anybody that's been dead, I don't think.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. And even to this time, Orthodox Jewish people do not embalm the dead. And so
And to do this to someone that you know and love, you know, would be...
It's almost hideous is really what it is. It is. It's like, it's really like, okay, Jesus, this is just beyond the pale of decorum. You know. But how would these things change for you in the immediate aftermath of witnessing this? So let's say that he comes out, they unwrap his head, and you see, whoa, that's really him. And his nose isn't falling off or anything, you know. And so, what would change for you?
I think it'd be shocking.
Yeah.
You know, so that your brain wouldn't connect with what your eyes were seeing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wouldn't know. I would be dumbfounded. I don't need to sit down. I mean, you know.
Have mercy. I'm about to swoon. Bring me the vapors. Oh, yeah. You know, how about with respect to your faith?
Well, when we were talking about it, I thought there couldn't be any doubt at all, like any ounce of doubt. You just, that somebody could bring somebody back from the dead, that you couldn't deny it. You couldn't.
Yeah.
And you would probably be looking right at Jesus after that. Yeah. You did what?
Yeah. You know, one of these.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. Now think about this, by the way, because I think that this is like probably 10 days or less before Jesus is crucified. You know. And so you've just witnessed this, and then almost a week later, everything blows up in your face. You know. Yeah.
So I have a question.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Nikki.
So to that point, they just saw this. And then when it happens to Jesus and Mary tells them, they act like she's crazy. So I don't get that. How can they forget that quickly?
Good point.
That quickly.
Well,
I mean,
you know,
Jesus did it.
but the way that the creators of the show and they really play this up with Judas is that Judas is really kind of charged up now. He's all amped up. Oh yeah, man, this is it. we're going to really, things are going to turn around with the Romans, no question about it. So, you don't understand how monumental this is. And so then they just hit the wall about a week later. And so I think that they still had that paradigm of that Jesus is going to be, and particularly we'll see next week with the triumphal entry, Jesus is going to be he's been slow, but he's finally going to do it. And then all of a sudden he's arrested, he's whipped, scourged, and then crucified. Go ahead, Lorraine.
I thought it was really interesting to watch how they kind of showed it a little bit from like Lazarus' point of view of the. I mean, they didn't totally do this, but they showed him, from the inside out. And I was just thinking the comparison with Jesus is that there was no human being that rolled the stone away. There was no human being that unwrapped him.
Yeah.
And yet with Lazarus, those were human actions that had to take place. But from Jesus's point, he looked out of that tomb. Like Lazarus, he was looking out. I don't know. It was really interesting how they played the two, because we know what's going to happen,
Yeah, we have already read the end of the book.
But no one was there to unbind Jesus.
Yeah.
Who did that?
And that's the whole question about the Shroud of Turin. And I know a lot of respected scholars, and I've talked to them personally, who are experts in that subject. I'm not anywhere close to being able to weigh in on it, but one guy I know who's a world-renowned expert on it is convinced that it's the real deal, and so that is kind of it. Almost is like this photographic, almost X-ray type of image, and it's entirely possible for the God who creates molecules to allow those molecules to pass through stuff. And I've heard theologians talk before is that the stone was not rolled away so that Jesus could get out. The stone was rolled away so the disciples could look in. So all right, well, let's go. This is such a good thing to think about. Janice, go ahead.
It makes me have a lot more compassion for his disciples, because like even like what Nikki was talking about, like I don't even think that if I saw him come out of that tomb, I don't even think like that my faith would be strong right then.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think my mind could even comprehend what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like I even in my own life, some of the things that have happened in my own life, I mean, I'm just like, what, and then we talk about it, trying to make it make sense in our own head, and so when I think about, wow, within a week they have all this stuff happening here where they had an idea of what Jesus was going to do and what he was going to be and everything, and then all this stuff happens that makes no sense to them. I mean, I have a lot more compassion for them.
Yeah, really. So
That's
according
true.
to yeah,
because I'm thinking, I was looking at it, well, I know the end of the story, but Janice is right. They didn't know the end of the story. So, of course, I can believe now because I know it's true, but they were from the other side of it.
Yeah, they were going through the process, and they were coming to the result. We're at the result, looking back on the process.
And they were still trying to figure out why he waited so long to go see Lazarus. Lazarus is his friend. He could have been there before he died. None of this is making sense.
No. So, all right, number 10. According to the creators of the show, Thomas struggles in the aftermath of the resurrection of Lazarus. Jesus talks about the difficulties of trusting the Father's permissive will. What ways have you found that have been, maybe it should be, in what ways have you found that to be true in your life or in the lives of others that you know? So the whole idea of the permissive will of God is that, Jesus weeps. Why is he weeping? Because he hates to see people going through this. But there's a thing called the perfect will of God, and then there's a thing called the permissive will of God. And so the perfect will of God is that nobody suffers and that nobody sins, But the permissive will of God is that he has allowed human beings to have the freedom to reject him or accept him. And we live in a world that is bound by the consequences of sin. And so even the people who have accepted Christ are still living in this environment of fallenness. And this was a big problem that I had early on in my Christian life, is that once I accepted Christ, is that my personal fallenness didn't go away. I was kind of hoping that it would, Not only would my sins be forgiven, but all of a sudden that I wouldn't be this kind of like broken Kerry. And so how have you struggled with the Father's permissive will in your own life? Let's see. Janice?
I saw something on the news today that kind of makes me think of this, is that, we had this big hurricane. It affected some of the states way worse than they thought it was going to. And I think that this person was probably in North Carolina, but she's a young mom. And in this storm, she lost both of her parents and her little boy, and it's like a lot of people will live through this, and they'll thrive and everything, but she's going to live with that, her whole life, that her family suffered this huge loss, and there are a lot of other people that have died, but, like, it's like Thomas, like why the person he loved died.
Now, is that
do something?
Was that the couple that was on the roof of their house and then it collapsed underneath them? And
I don't think so.
Well, at any rate, and hey, here's something to consider. A lot of Christians lost everything, both loved ones and property, and also many of them have been injured severely through that. So, Lorene.
Yeah, I think I think this is the number one people have with God. It's just so hard to understand how we have to trust him when things don't seem right or when he seems silent. I just think it's the number one thing.
I agree 100%.
It's an unanswered question, and it's not going to always be answered.
I think that what happens in life is that we feel betrayed by God, and then we find reasons to justify our disbelief in him. Janice?
And there's so many ways in this life that aren't fair. We want everything to be fair, and it's not fair. And I remember when we were doing a lot of recovery work with women who were in drug rehab and stuff, and a lot of them had babies while they were in there and everything. And it's amazing that they could be taking drugs and everything, and their babies are born perfectly healthy and strong, while you see some other person who is a good mom, who really wants nothing more than to have a baby, and either can't get pregnant or has a miscarriage or something happens, you lose the baby, and you're thinking, this lady doesn't even care. She doesn't even want her baby. And, why, how is that fair? Like, and I could just see why people would be saying, it's hard to understand.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Lorene.
Yeah, it's weird when you say fair, because I'm sure I want things to be fair.
No, I don't.
Seriously, because I would be done. I mean,
I know I would be. Yeah.
So in a sense, the only answer to the fairness is Jesus is giving his life for us. That is the only way it can be fair, because it wasn't him, but he's the only one who makes it all fair.
If God gave us what we deserved,
No, I know.
no. That's why I think it's the stupidest thing to say, well, as long as my good outweighs my bad, I think I'll be okay. I mean, really, yeah.
But even the disciples in the Chosen are, like little James. It wasn't fair,
No.
for him to have to deal with his affliction when he sees Jesus healing other people, and over and over and over, they see that kind of thing happen,
Yeah.
And I think that's what we have to realize is that God allows us to go through circumstances in our life we're never going to understand probably until we get to heaven exactly why.
Yeah.
But there's so many ways that you can learn and grow through it and come out of it in the end a stronger Christian.
Yeah, one of the things that I always like to tell people that I coach on this particular topic is that don't waste your pain. That doesn't mean that that we're happy for the pain that we have, but our pain is God allows the pain in our life not to break us, but to bring us to the place where life can be good again, and even though the scars remain, the wounds can be healed. And so let's see. All right, I think we're here. Oops. Yeah, we are. So here again, everything goes wacky on me on this. Mary Magdalene takes a moment to look in. I love that. See, I just love that moment. That Mary Magdalene, and it's not, quote unquote biblical, but she takes a moment to look into Lazarus's tomb. What do you think that this is foreshadowing? Janice?
She's going to be looking in another empty tomb soon.
She is the very first person to witness the resurrection.
Yep.
And it's interesting. And that's evidence why we can have confidence. Our dog is hearing
My
your
dog
cat.
can hear their cat.
But that's one of the reasons why we can be confident that the resurrection, as reported in the Gospels, is authentic, because, out of all of the people that should have been the first to witness the resurrection, it should have been Peter or James or somebody important like that. But Mary Magdalene, from whom it says that 7 demons were cast out of her, and that, and also she's a woman, and that's so cool at so many levels. She was not just a woman; she was a woman of bad reputation, So, all right, Janice.
Sorry.
You
Our
and your
cat's
dog.
throwing a tantrum because we're not paying attention to him.
She's barking like by the front door.
All right. So, number 12 here. In the show, Martha says, and here again, I love this moment. She's talking with her sister in the aftermath. You never give any thought, like finally everything quiets down and the sisters have a moment together. And that, she said, and Martha says to Mary, what do you give someone who can raise the dead? Well, what do you think is the answer to that question? Go ahead, Nikki.
I have a question about that scene. She said he doesn't need, anything, and she was holding something, but I couldn't see what she was looking at. What was it?
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look.
Okay.
I just don't know. And so,
I didn't know if it was significant.
yeah. What do you think? Is that, what do you think is the answer to the question of what do you give to someone who can raise the dead? Janice?
Your heart.
Yeah. That's all you can. You know, your love, your allegiance, you know. He doesn't need anything. And that's kind of an interesting thought. Let's just kind of tease this out. I had some Jehovah's Witnesses come to my door today, and they and I already use a couple questions whenever they come to my door, and I don't do it to toy with them. I just want to kind of. There's a Christian apologist I know. He says that all I want to do when I talk to a person like that is to put a pebble in their shoe and have them walk away from the experience kind of like thinking, wait a minute, what about that? You know? And so they came to my door and I had a little conversation with them. I don't spend a lot of time with that because it just I've never seen it to be productive at all. Not that it can't, but I've never experienced it to be productive. But so help me. I got off track. Help me to get back on track. What were we talking about? You know.
What you could give him.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Your heart. Yeah, that's where we're going. Is that he's the God of reality. And I think this is really fascinating. All of creation belongs to him, but he doesn't own it all. You know, because there's a whole, mass of humanity that say, I'm not going to acknowledge my Creator. And so, even though he has legitimate claim over our lives, he doesn't own it until we give it to him. So I think that's profound. It's not because I said it. I just think it's, I mean, it's, I steal almost all of my material anyway, so I don't know who to give, who to give credit to for that one. But go ahead. Lorene, were you going to say something? No. Okay. This miracle was Jesus' last before his crucifixion. He knew that it was a provocation. What does this say about his commitment to his destiny and the stubborn resistance of the religious leaders? Now let's read John 11:53 and also John 12:10. So, and Nikki, you're normally a little bit quicker than the rest of us on this.
Tonight I don't have my iPad.
Okay, well, I'm going to look it up on my phone as we're here, but if anybody has it, let's see, John 11:53, right? So in John 11:53 it says this. I got to back away from my phone so I can read it. There it is. It says, so this is talking about after the resurrection of Lazarus. It's talking about the religious leaders, and notice what it says. So from that day on, they plotted to take his life. So their response is that, I'm talking about Jesus, we got to kill this guy. That is shuddering to think that our religious brains can go that far off track. John 12:10. Does somebody have that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well.
Wow. Talk about the depravity. Talk about the depravity. Is that, let's kill Jesus. Oh, okay. Well, we might as well kill this other guy too, because this whole thing's getting out of control. So, just a few more questions here. In the show, Jesus says this about Thomas, and he's talking to Lazarus in that moment. As for the heartbroken, he cannot accept my love or words tonight. His brothers will carry him. What is the value of community when God doesn't make sense? Go ahead, Lorene.
Yeah, I think sometimes maybe we forget about the community part. But I know in my own personal life, if it wasn't for the community that surrounded me, I don't know. You know, you just can't. Those platitudes just don't work. You just have to have somebody that's going to touch your shoulder, hold your hand, you know, take you to the ER. You know, the ER, and it just, you got to have that.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why men oftentimes are in greater danger than women, because men oftentimes live very isolated lives. You know, and when tragedy hits, we just try to muscle through it because we've been taught that that's the way of the male. You know. Janice?
I think that when you can't see Jesus is when you need the other Christians to come around and show you what he is, you know, by how they take care of you and love you and all those kind of things. And like Lorene says, you know, are there for you through that whole thing.
Yeah. Okay. Two more. Philip says, Thomas, there is no use putting suffering on a scale and weighing it. Why do we tend to do this? Why is it mistaken? Go ahead, Nikki.
I think when we're going through it, it's so intense that we think ours is the worst. And so if we're measuring it, you know, you can't measure anybody's pain. Everybody's pain is unique, and you can't say mine is worse than yours, or you know, you don't know what I'm going through, or you know, you don't understand. But when you're going through it, it just seems unbearable. So when anybody else says they understand, you don't think that they do.
Yeah. So, Lorene?
Yeah, or you go the other way. Your pain is not
significant.
Really pain because it's not compared to so-and-so whose daughter died. How is my pain over breaking my arm any worse than, you know, I mean, you go the other way too, and then there's no doubt in that.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I don't know why, you know, this, when we talk about these issues, that I knew a Christian leader, this is back in my first ministry, who was a consultant to our church. And I really liked the guy, you know, and he was helping us to learn how to grow our church, which it never did. But he still had a good heart, you know, and he knew a lot of good stuff, you know. But he invited me over to his house one day, and I can't even remember why, but he had an adult son, and the adult son he had to go in and check on him or something. I don't exactly remember the course of events, but the adult son was bedridden. I believe he may have had a version of cerebral palsy. I just don't remember for sure. I know he had some sort of affliction, but because he was in so much pain from being bedridden, they had to take out his hip joints. You know. Yeah. And so so this guy, his son had been living like that for years and years and years and years. I think about him from time to time. I'm sure that the consultant guy is dead. Quite possibly his son is now. But the things that people go through, you know. And so when I think about suffering, I have a lot of people, because I've been kind of on the front row of human suffering throughout my ministry. And a lot of people flash through my mind. I spent many years in combating human trafficking in Cambodia and meeting girls. And I could tell you stories that I can't really repeat in polite company of what happened to them and the physical problems that endured, not just the emotional scars that they endured. And so, but compared to what they've gone through, my suffering doesn't seem significant. But it is my suffering. And it's my story. I'm not walking the path of little James. I'm not walking the path of Thomas, but I'm walking my path. I don't want any more suffering. I'm going on record right now. I'm 70 years old, Lord. Oh, by the way, the longer you live, the more you realize we ain't done with the suffering yet. What a buzzkill. So, all right, finally, is that what are your thoughts about the closing scene where Mary Magdalene shares her thoughts with Matthew? She says, I still don't know why it has to be this way. The bitter often mingled with the sweet. Maybe I never will, at least not this side of... And her voice trails off. What are some of your thoughts as to why life goes like this, the bitter mingled with the sweet? Noreen?
Well, I know from my own personal experience that the sweet is so much sweeter when I've had the bitter.
Yeah.
If I didn't have the bitter, I wouldn't know what the sweet was. I don't think.
Let me ask you this question. Would you have wanted to live life without the bitter that you've experienced?
No.
Yeah,
No.
Why?
It's made me who I am. It corrected some wrong thinking in my head. It got me back on track. It made me trust God. All those things that are bitter, I think were good for me, and it's what I needed. Now, what I wanted for anybody else? No.
Yeah.
Never.
You don't even want it for yourself.
I wouldn't. But
Yeah.
now that I've done it, I don't know. To me, my walk with God is so much sweeter because I've had a lifetime of some bitter stuff. I don't even know. It's just God's way. It's just, I think we have to have both. We have to have both.
Yeah. Janice?
I think that if life was always just sweet,
Mm-hmm.
you might have a hard time having faith in God, because when things are going really good,
Mm-hmm.
you're just like, life's good, everything's going good, thank you, God. Just weep and cry for God to come and help you. And
Yeah. I know in my own life is that when I went through the bitterness in my life is that I was much more earnest in my prayers, and it also was what took me down, helping me to have a better appreciation and understanding of what grief looks like. Okay, I want to just kind of circle back to what Janice said. If it was always sweet, so why in heaven will a place where it's always going to be, then we're going to be perfect there? Because is that of the angelic beings. I mean, even Michael, the archangel, doesn't dare to rebuke him. We read in the book of Jude. And so Lucifer had glory. He had the presence of God. But he abandoned that. Same with Adam and Eve. They had glory. They walked with God daily. They were innocent. There was no reference point. I do not believe that evil is necessary. Okay, now I've already said that. I don't believe that evil is necessary. But why won't it go bad for us again in heaven? Because I, at one time, was convinced that I'd probably be the one, if anybody blows it in heaven. You know, so why not? Janice?
I was just thinking about, the scripture talks about having faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love.
Mm-hmm.
When you get to heaven, like on earth, we're still hoping, we're still showing faith that these things are going to come to pass.
Mm-hmm.
But once Jesus comes again and we're in heaven with God, the only thing that's going to be there is perfect love.
Yeah.
And so I think that is why we can know that it's going to be sweet.
Perfect love that's freely given, Here's this. Go ahead, Lorraine, and then I'll tell you how I've worked this through myself.
I just was remembering that verse that said he's the finisher and
the author and finisher.
Our faith.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's our faith that has to be worked on in those bitter times, and when we get to heaven, our faith will be perfected and finished.
Mm-hmm.
Need that component anymore. There might be something else we need, but I don't know about that. So,
well, here's what I believe, and it doesn't mean I'm right. It's just what I believe. Is that I don't believe that we're going to lose our memories in heaven.
No.
I think that there will be the preservation of identity, and that there will be the completion of my identity, but I'm still going to be Kerry in heaven, just like Jesus. The same Jesus that went into that tomb is the same Jesus that came out. Obviously, there were new properties that he possessed in his physical body, but he was the firstborn from among the dead, we're told in the scriptures. But there is this preservation of identity. So here's how I think about it. It's like the person who has gone through, let's say, a horrible experience with cancer. And then imagine if that person who's gone through a horrible experience with cancer was cured. Not just cancer-free, but completely restored to health. There's never going to be a moment going forward in their life where they say, man, I really wish I could go back to the good old days when I had cancer. And that's just going to be us in heaven. There wouldn't, even though I believe in the preservation of free will in heaven, we're always going to be freely oriented to do God's will, because we just simply want to. Hey, well, this has been fun tonight, guys. A lot of good stuff that we talked about, and so we're going to wrap it up. Anything that you'd like to say before we close? Well, I'm going to say this. Thank you. And, really, and I'm not just saying that as a formality. I enjoy my time with you folks. I value your insights, and I really appreciate our discussions. So that's it for now, and I'm going to jump to our final scene. Oh, there he is. He's waving goodbye. All right. Bye-bye for now, guys. Hey, we meet at online, where you found us today, for the most part, online, and you can find us on our YouTube channel at Compass Church Riverside, or on Facebook at Compass Riverside. Or if you just even go to our website, compasslive.org, it has the links to our main social channels where we from which we broadcast. I appreciate you dropping in tonight, and I hope that your life has been blessed. I know mine has, by our discussion tonight. And this Sunday, I'm going to be talking about the artistry of God's amazing grace. It has been a fun message for me to prepare, and I hope that you'll be blessed by watching it. I'll see